Tonight, the government's insisting thousands of asylum seekers lined up to be sent to Rwanda will be found. The Home Office admits more than 3,500 cannot be immediately located. But Number 10 says it's confident they will be. Should they be so sure? I'll ask the former Chief Inspector of Borders and Immigration. We'll be live in Parliament as peers in the House of Lords try and push the government towards paying out compensation for the victims of the infected blood scandal. 2 victims are dying each week. I'll speak to the MP, Diana Johnson. She's leading a cross-party effort for money to be paid to all of those who've been affected by the scandal. And Deputy Political Editor Sam Coates will be here with some fresh new polling on this week's local council elections. The Conservatives are already fearing a pounding. Find out if they're right to. And as Labour delve into the political archives to launch an attack on Rishi Sunak's ambition to scrap national insurance, we've got a quiz for you on some of the other interesting political nuggets that have emerged in the National Archives over the years. All that and more with Dawn Butler and Giles Kenningham, who will be with us for the next hour. It's Tuesday. I'm Sophy Ridge, live from Westminster, and this is the Politics Hub. Hello, good evening. Now, I want to start the programme this evening by bringing you the latest on a story that's provoked a lot of political reaction today. The death of a 14-year-old boy after a stabbing attack in East London. A man armed with a sword has been arrested after members of the public and police officers were attacked this morning. 2 police officers are among 4 people who remain in hospital with non-life-threatening injuries. The London Mayor, Sadiq Khan, thanked the police and emergency services for their response. The Prime Minister said that such violence has no place on our streets. Here's Rachel Venables with the latest.
The end of a rampage. This was the moment police tasered and arrested a 36-year-old man. After reports of people being stabbed in a residential area. The suspect had been seen here pacing and crouching outside people's homes, gripping in his hand a more than foot-long samurai-style sword.
There was a massive response from the police. There was loads of them. Must have been at least a dozen of them. And they've all ran up to where he was in the driveway, just shouting and sort of screaming at him to put the sword there. He had like a big samurai sword, and then they were screaming at him, and then he was just shouting back, and then they tased him, and then just about 7 or 8 of them just piled on top of him.
By the time they'd arrested a 36-year-old man, 5 people, including 2 police officers, had been injured. Tragically, despite the work of paramedics, a 14-year-old boy lost his life.
Our thoughts, of course, remain with the family and friends of the 14-year-old boy who very sadly died here this morning. The 36-year-old man arrested at the scene is currently in hospital, having suffered injuries when his van collided with a building. He has been arrested on suspicion of murder. At this time, given his injuries, we have been unable to interview him. And despite urgent and extensive checks today, we have found no trace of a prior incident involving him so far, but we will of course continue to make those inquiries.
What no doubt began as a chaotic and terrifying incident this morning has now turned into a murder investigation, with the police setting up a huge cordon blocking off the roads. Forensics officers have been painstakingly gathering evidence while police try to speak to witnesses and piece together what happened. The King has sent his thoughts and prayers to the victims and the young boy's family, while politicians shared their horror at the news.
This attack is devastating and appalling. I'm sure I speak on behalf of the entire city when I say our thoughts and prayers are with this young child and his family. What I do know is that the police and emergency services responded very quickly to the call-out from members of the public. The police and other emergency services were well aware this was a dangerous man with a sword. They ran towards him, not thinking about their own safety, to protect other members of the public.
All day, the community has been gathering in a state of shock.
Hainault has for the most part been a fairly peaceful and a quiet place, and so today's tragic events come as a real shock to people. They really do. And our hearts, the hearts of the whole community, go out to the families of all of those who have been affected by today's events.
The police have asked for patience as they gather evidence, but it will take a long time for local people to come to terms with the horror of what happened here today and with the loss of such a young life. Rachel Venables, Sky News.
Well, this is what the local MP, the Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting, said.
Our whole community will be devastated by the heartbreaking news that a 14-year-old boy was killed in the horrific sword attack in Hainault this morning that saw 4 others injured, including 2 Metropolitan Police officers. I can't imagine what that poor boy's family are going through, and they have my deepest heartfelt condolences. I particularly want to thank the emergency services for their courageous response, in particular the heroic Metropolitan Police officers who put themselves in harm's way to protect others. They are the best of us.
Well, we can go live now to the scene, and our correspondent Matthew Thompson. Matthew, we've seen some really distressing images coming out of Hainault throughout the day.
Yeah, I mean, they really are quite extraordinary. In all the years we've been covering things like this, you seldom get that level of detail in terms of the final moments of this 22 minutes of horror that occurred here this morning. It's quite unusual that cameras are rolling at the very moment of arrest, but that's what we've seen. And I think the 2 things that emerged from those extraordinary pictures are, first of all, the size of the blade that this person was wielding. It really was a sword of over a foot or so long. And then the second thing is the bravery of the police, who we see in those pictures charge towards the person wielding the sword, and 2 tasers are fired, but in particular one of them, a female officer, fires the second taser shot and really neutralizes the attacker, and then the police swarm in around him, and one of the police officers is still shouting, "Drop it, drop it." So although he's out of picture, the impression given is that this person still has the blade in his hands as the police swarm him and put their hands on him as the command is given, and try and bring him to neutralize him in some way. And it is quite extraordinary that they would put themselves in harm's way. We don't know exactly when the police officers were injured in that process, but 2 of them sustained very serious knife injuries that required surgery. So really quite extraordinary scenes.
Matthew, thank you very much indeed. Matthew Thompson there reporting on the scenes in East London. And tune into the UK tonight at 8 p.m. this evening for a special programme on knife crime with Sarah Jane Mee. Now, this evening I want to talk to you about migration, because it's been another difficult day of headlines for the government. The government denies losing track of likely Rwanda deportees. The Home Office lost contact with thousands set for Rwanda flight. A document slipped out by the department states that of the 5,700 migrants identified for removal to Rwanda, only 2,145 of them continue to report to the Home Office and can be located for detention. Apparently, the Home Office has, until now, relied on the incentive of free accommodation and a £49 weekly allowance to prevent people from absconding, but officials fear the threat of deportation would outweigh that. You don't have to be a genius to work out that if you know you're about to be put on a flight to Rwanda, you might stop checking in with the Home Office. You might quietly slip away. It's thought that many will then try to make their way to Ireland, where the government says the threat of deportation to Rwanda is causing fearful migrants to head for Ireland. Instead of the UK, a diplomatic row has also broken out over whether they can be sent back. Now, look, there is an argument that all of this shows the Rwanda plan is working. Purely on the metric of whether the threat of being sent to Rwanda is a deterrent, well, it looks like people may already be changing their behaviour. Success. There are 2 things that I would add, though. Firstly, it can't be a good thing to see so many vulnerable people simply disappearing, making it much more likely that they'll be exploited, sell their bodies, work illegally, become victims of crime. And of course, the government wants the threat of being sent to Rwanda to act as a deterrent for migrants who are not in the UK, rather than a deterrent for those already here. That's the purpose. And on that metric, well, it really is too difficult to tell right now, too early to tell. Here's Sky's Becky Johnson.
Asylum seekers turning up for their regular appointments at this immigration reporting centre were being warned by protesters that if they went in, they could be detained ahead of being flown to Rwanda.
We know some good legal representatives.
Charity workers were handing out numbers of lawyers to call if needed. Yusuf, who's from Somalia, has to sign in weekly here in Solihull. He says inside it's the quietest it's ever been, and he saw someone being detained.
They catch him, then 4 officers, and they bring you the room, another room. That's why I think they bring you for detention center, because maybe Rwanda you go in, maybe. It's empty, the people there is scary. No one
It's empty inside?
It's empty, yeah, it's empty. Yeah.
Is it normally full?
Normally full, yeah, normally full. I'm waiting 1 hour for queue. Yeah.
And today, how long did you wait?
1 minute. A minute, yeah.
So you think people aren't showing up?
No. For me, surprise. Yeah. But the people, they scare Rwanda. That's why, you know.
Details published by the Home Office reveal for the first time the people they intend to put on the first flights are those who arrived between January 2022 and last June. Many have been sent a notice of intent explaining they're being considered for Rwanda. But of the 5,700 eligible, the Home Office admits it doesn't know where over 3,500 are. That's because either those people aren't required to regularly report to centres like this, or they've deliberately decided to stop attending appointments. And now they know that if they do come here, they risk immediate detention. More may decide to stop showing up. Government efforts to rapidly close dozens of asylum seeker hotels mean many have been moved around the country in recent months. Charities say it's not unusual for the Home Office to send letters to the wrong hotel, having lost track of where people are. But ministers insist anyone trying to disappear will be traced.
We want the message to go out loud and clear that if somebody doesn't report as they should do, they shouldn't think that they'll get away with it. They will be found.
Back in Solihull, a van used for transporting immigration detainees left the Home Office building. Blacked out windows meant we couldn't see if any migrants were inside. The group currently being targeted for Rwanda doesn't include anyone who's arrived since last summer, and record numbers continue to come. No sign yet the Rwanda plan is stopping the boats. Becky Johnson, Sky News.
Well, with us now in the studio is John Vine, the former Chief Inspector of Borders and Immigration. Great to have you with us.
Good evening.
Can you explain to me what's happened here? How can the government just lose track of people?
Well, it depends really what you mean by lose. So when people come to the UK, very often they're either detained in an immigration detention centre or they're housed in government accommodation. Of course, the government has decided that it wants to reduce the bill for Home Office accommodation. So many people are allowed to suggest that they have relatives, addresses, you know, friends in the community. And the Home Office allows people to, usually under conditions where they come and report on a regular basis to an immigration centre, and they're allowed to go into the community and live with friends and relatives. Very often, though, in my experience, the vetting of those addresses is pretty cursory, and so I'm not entirely sure the Home Office have the capacity to actually check all those addresses. And in any case, people have always absconded from reporting. And often that's because they're being recriminalised by organised crime, offered jobs in the grey economy or illegal activity, and very often it's for a whole range of other reasons as well.
And you think that perhaps the threat, if you like, of being deported to Rwanda could make more people abscond?
Well, it remains to be seen, doesn't it? We've been talking about this policy for 2 years now, so now we're at the point where we need to see what plans the Home Office have made and whether we think they're effective. This isn't a very good start, actually. If over half of the people they're going to potentially deport to Rwanda are missing or not within the purview of the Home Office, then immigration enforcement in the Home Office has got its work cut out to find them.
I mean, they seem quite confident. If you look at, for example, what Victoria Atkins said to my colleague Will Furley today, she said they will be found.
Well, yes, it's easier said than done, isn't it? I mean, obviously, immigration enforcement teams are going to follow the leads they have. They're going to be liaising with local police forces and other agencies. And at the end of the day, there's got to be an awful lot of effort go into finding them.
They won't all be found, though, will they?
Well, no, they won't all be found. I don't think so. And I think a lot of those people, then, the question is, where do they go? If the government are going to deport people, they're going to have to keep them within a controlled environment so they can find them and remove them when, you know, they want to. And unfortunately, the record on enforced removals from the UK is much worse than it's ever been. So when I was the Chief Inspector of Borders, there were about 15,000 enforced removals a year, and that fell by 80-odd% in the period up to the year before the pandemic. And so the Home Office's efficiency in removing people in this way actually lessened during that time. And of course, enforced removals are very difficult. They're difficult for the staff who have to do it. And of course, there's a lot of concern about the welfare of people who are being deported. So the way in which the Home Office actually managed this whole process is going to come under a lot of scrutiny.
You know more than anyone the likelihood of this. I just want to get a bit of a sense from you about how you think Rwanda is actually going to work in practice. I mean, how many people are we talking about who you think realistically are going to be... Well,
nobody knows how it's going to work because it's not been tried. So it needs to be tried and then we'll see. But I suspect what will happen is that the government will try and... well, I think now, in identifying people for removal, that's part and parcel of what they see is going to be the deterrent factor. And I don't think it's going to take thousands and thousands of people being removed for it to have some impact. But what the impact is likely to have is very difficult to know. Is it going to make a very small difference to the number of people arriving by boats across the Channel, an insignificant difference, or is it going to make a major difference? We don't know. And so it's anybody's guess, and how soon that's going to happen is going to be under scrutiny as well. You know, is it going to be within weeks or months?
What do you think? What's your sense? What's your best guess?
My sense is that it will have an impact. The only problem is, I think we need to get on with it if it's going to happen. And there needs to be some form of evaluation of how it's working. And I wonder what the Home Office is putting in place to evaluate. I mean, very often with illegal migration, one of the problems is there are no figures that anybody can really rely on. And so, you know, what's happened recently is, of course, journalists have been speaking to people on both sides of the Channel. They've been saying, well, how would you be put off if this became a policy? But it depends who you speak to. Some people are going to be, other people aren't. Trying to find sort of the figures which prove the effectiveness of this at the end of the day is going to be really hard.
You've been talking about the kind of the nuts and bolts, if you like, whether or not it was going to work on the government's metrics. I just want to talk at the end, if I may, about the kind of human impact of the people that we've been discussing today. If they have disappeared, and I know that the Home Office disputes that, they said that they're going to be found, where might they go? What might they be doing?
Well, in my experience, people disappear into the grey economy. They disappear into... they have friends and relatives who will cover for them. And I think, you know, very often it's a case of the immigration enforcement teams, when I was inspecting them, when they were operating and they raided either premises, premises of employment, they would very often not find the people they expected to find. So they go with an idea in their mind about who they would encounter, and they encountered people they never knew were there. So it's a very imprecise science. And what makes it...
If you're in the grey economy,
yeah.
What does that mean? You know, where are you living? What kind of work are you doing? Are you
well, very
vulnerable
often,
to be exploited?
You're very much so. And very often these people who've been exploited by the criminal gangs who bring them to the UK in the first place are then re-exploited by organised crime and are very vulnerable to organised crime, because many people who come to the UK in this way are not very confident in approaching officialdom in their own country. And so the idea of approaching the authorities or the police is something that is alien to them and something they're not very comfortable with. So that makes them even more vulnerable to organised crime and people who want to exploit them. So there is very much a human side to this. And again, I think the whole implementation of the policy is going to be judged very often I think, by the public on what they see in terms of the way people are treated. And I think they'll be looking to see that people are treated fairly, whatever the policy happens to be that's being implemented.
Thank you very much indeed. Great to speak to you on this topic tonight, so thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Well, that story is sure to feature in tomorrow's newspapers. We'll have our extended press preview and news review from 10:30 this evening with tonight's news and tomorrow's headlines. Joining us will be Sebastian Payne, who is the director of the Onward think tank, and Sonia Soda, the chief leader writer at The Observer. Right, let's bring in our duo for tonight, shall we? The Labour MP, Dawn Butler, and Giles Kenningham, who was head of press in Downing Street under David Cameron. Great to have you both on the programme tonight. Dawn, I've been really interested to get your sort of thoughts on this story today. I'm sure it's something that you feel quite strongly about. What is your sort of reaction to the news?
Well, I think the Rwanda policy per se isn't a humane or dignified policy at all. It's not even workable. And I think that's the main thing. Like, if you think about the practicalities of it, right? We've spent nearly £500 million on this policy. Nobody's been sent to Rwanda. Before somebody can be sent to Rwanda, they've got to go through an immigration policy. They've got to go through it. So they've got to be asked their details. They have to have an assessment, and then Rwanda decides who they accept. And if Rwanda decides they're going to accept this person, this refugee, then they can go, and then the UK has to pay an extra £171,000 to Rwanda for each person they send. So you're thinking, we're spending this much money on a PR stunt. Why don't we just treat people with humanity and care? And why don't we make the assessments in the UK, have a policy and an immigration policy that's fast and efficient, and do it that way?
Giles, it feels like there's two arguments that people are making on the news today about migrants going missing, about the row with Ireland as well, where Ireland is saying that, you know, they've had more people coming because of Rwanda. Does it show that Rwanda is working, that it's a deterrent, that people are changing their behaviour? Or does it show that actually, look, this isn't going to work because the government can't even find the people to put on the planes?
I think it's too early to say no system is perfect. Clearly they're going to have to operationalise this, and that means getting flights going in the next 9 to 11 weeks. Rishi Sunak's going to have to do that. You know, he staked his premiership on this, and we're soon going to be into election territory. So look, no system is perfect. Dawn talks about, you know, the system being inhumane. As the Prime Minister said, there's nothing humane about people crossing the channel in a boat and dying. You know, small boat arrivals went up by 1/3 last year, so doing nothing is not an option. I actually think if the Tories make this work, they're on the right side of public sentiment.
It's just a PR stunt. Why not tackle the gangs?
But I don't think...
Why not tackle the gangs? Because that's how you stop people from getting in the boats in the first place. What you're doing is you're dealing with the end problem. You're feeding the problem and not the solution.
There is an issue about them coming from France, because seeking asylum is going to the first safe place that you find, and that is France. And clearly there's an issue there.
Okay,
also,
so why doesn't the government deal with France in the proper manner? You're feeding the problem, not the solution.
I think they have been, but I think still that the French haven't really got that imperative to stop people coming over. Now, this has been going on for ages. I think under Labour, it was up to 450,000 as a backlog. Small boat arrivals are going up by 1/3. We've got to do something. And I don't think I've heard, maybe I'm wrong, you know, I think Labour have talked about increasing border force funding. But I think the Tories have done this already in terms of doubling the financing going towards tackling illegal immigration.
Yeah. This government's not dealing with the problem. This government's doing a PR stunt. Even if the government sends somebody...
Will it be a PR stunt if these 2,500 people go through Rwanda?
OK, so 2,500 people, even if this government did that, they're still going to pay £171,000 per person.
Dawn,
it's costing the UK a fortune.
Can I ask, and I'm not saying it will work because we don't know yet, right? If it does work and the small boats arrivals go down, is there an argument for keeping the Rwanda scheme at all? Or do you think it is inhumane as of itself?
What does work look like? What is the end objective?
A reduction in the small boat
arrivals.
So if the objective is we want to stop small boats arrivals, then we have to deal with the source, which is dealing with the gangs that put people in the boats in the first place. This isn't dealing with that. This is downstreaming. This is dealing with the people who are already here. What you want to do is stop people from coming. You know, people are getting bigger boats and they're coming over in bigger boats. There's been more people coming over in unmanaged migration than previously. So it's not working.
Well, I don't think we're going to know. I think this is the point. They do have to operationalise and it has to happen quickly. We've been talking about it for far too long.
Well, we have certainly been talking about it for a long time. I think that's something that everyone in the room can definitely agree on. Thank you both very much indeed, Dawn and Giles. You're watching the Politics Hub. Coming up. Peers and House of Lords are tonight trying to implement a full compensation scheme for the victims of the infected blood scandal. We'll bring you the latest next. And the challengers prepared to enter the field to replace Hamza Yousaf as First Minister after his shock resignation yesterday. And Labour raid the archives to make the late Conservative Chancellor Nigel Lawson a star witness in their attack on the Conservatives' tax plans. But what else lies hidden in the vaults?
Big stories don't always come from big cities.
I'm Lisa Dowd and I'm Sky's Midlands correspondent, and this is where I grew up. We can reveal that the driver who hit Harry Dunn is 42-year-old Anne Sakulas.
Just met the president and we never thought we'd get this far.
This is what they're up against. The wind is the really big problem. It is back-breaking work and the smoke is thick. It's been working well. Water levels are dropping, but no one knows what impact further rain will have. What would you do if this place wasn't open?
We take you to the heart of the stories that shape our world.
It's really scary. We're terrified.
In this community, I'm told that everybody knows someone affected by COVID.
Hopefully this will be the last wave.
I never knew they would make it. It's amazing.
Change seems tantalisingly close in this corner of the UK. Wales was the first to introduce the plastic bag charge. This is my patch, my specialism. It's also my home.
Hello, welcome back. You're watching the Politics Hub on Sky News. The top stories tonight. A 14-year-old boy has been killed in a sword attack in north-east London. 4 others, including 2 officers, are in hospital after the incident in Hainault, and a 36-year-old man has been arrested. You can stay with us here on Sky News for the UK Tonight. Coming after us this evening, when we're going to have a special programme on knife crime with Sarah Jamie. There she is. That is live from 8 p.m. Now, Downing Street is insisting that more than 3,000 asylum seekers who've been earmarked for deportation to Rwanda are not missing, and that it's confident of their whereabouts. It's after a Home Office document revealed that many of the 5,700 identified can't be immediately located. And peers are voting tonight on an amendment to try and push the government towards paying compensation to the victims of the infected blood scandal, as campaigners revealed today that 710 people have died since the inquiry into the scandal was announced in 2017. We're going to be live in the Lords in a moment because in the last few minutes there's been some movement on this from the government, so stay with us for that. And to remind you, as ever, you can stay up to date with all the goings-on in Westminster on our digital politics hub by scanning the QR code at the bottom of your screen, among the other stories we've been covering that you can read about today. Well, the Foreign Secretary has said that banning Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist group wouldn't be in Britain's interests. Lord Cameron added that the UK has already taken sufficient steps to put pressure on Iran, insisting that proscribing the group would lead to a break in vital diplomatic relations with them. New checks on food and plants imported from Europe began this morning. That is Sarah J. Mee. She's not an expert in this, but the government's admitted that post-Brexit inspections will cost businesses billions of pounds a year. Our business correspondent Paul Kelso has written about how industry leaders are warning it could add billions onto bills for consumers. And the Prime Minister's been acknowledging that the media industry that holds governments to account strengthens democracy and enriches society. Mr Sunak opened the Society of Editors' 25th anniversary conference, admitting that even though journalists and politicians will always clash, it's vital that the media industry holds power to account. All that and more, just scan the QR code on the bottoms of your screen. Now, on to the infected blood scandal next tonight. We were discussing that earlier, and victims of the scandal have faced a long campaign for justice. Just today, new figures from campaigners show that 710 people have died. That's just since 2017, when the public inquiry into how thousands of patients were infected with HIV and hepatitis C through contaminated blood products imported from the United States during the 1970s and 1980s was announced. Well, now the focus has shifted to getting the government to agree a compensation package in line with what was recommended by the chair of the public inquiry. Now, the House of Lords is due to vote on an amendment to the Victims and Prisoners Bill, which would go some way to achieving that. This is the live shots from the Lords right now. There's reportedly been concerns within government about the potential cost of full compensation. One estimate that was circulating last year was it could cost the state around £20 billion. Now, in the last few minutes, while we've been on air, the government has accepted a Labour-led demand that the infected blood compensation scheme be set up within 3 months of the bill coming into force. Well, we can speak to the woman driving it, Dame Dana Johnson, the chair of the Home Affairs Select Committee, one of the MPs who's been campaigning on the issue. Dana, just first of all, just bring us up to speed with what's been happening in the House of Lords.
Well, I've been watching what's been happening in the House of Lords tonight, and I understand that the government have accepted the amendment that the Labour frontbench put forward, which was for the compensation body to be set up within 3 months of royal assent. Now, that mirrors what the House of Commons voted for last December, so I'm pleased that the government have recognised how important it is to have a time frame for this, because as you've said, people are dying. Roughly 2 people die every week from this scandal. And what we need now is quickness. We need this compensation body set up, and we need the compensation to be paid as quickly as possible to the infected and the affected.
The stories are heartbreaking, and I don't think anyone would argue that these individuals, these poor families, don't need the compensation. But it is expensive. It's a lot of money. It sounds like the government is going to have to find that money, within months. How do you think they're going to do it?
Well, the government accepted some time ago the moral case for compensation to be paid, but what they have failed to do so far is to actually say how much is going to be paid. They've not talked about the quantum, and there's lots of rumours swirling around about how much that would be. Now, it seems to me from the evidence that was given to the public inquiry, it may be around £5 billion that has to be paid out. But remember that this has been delayed for so long. If the state had taken responsibility earlier on, the actual amount that has to be paid out would have been much less. And I know times are very difficult now, and the economy's not doing very well, and public finances are not doing very well. But that is not the fault of these people who were infected, who were harmed by the state, and the effect it's then had on their families and their loved ones. So the state has to make good on this, and that compensation does have to be paid. We're still waiting, though, for what those figures look like.
I know it's a story that you've been looking into for a long time now, and I just wondered if there are any sort of stories or individuals that particularly have stayed with you from the people who've been impacted by
Well,
this scandal?
There's my own constituent, Glenn Wilkinson, who was a mild haemophiliac, who had a dental operation at the local hospital in Hull and was infected with hepatitis C, and the effect it's had on his life. There's also Nick Sainsbury, who was a man who lived just outside Hull, who went to the Trelaws boarding school, where they were getting, they thought, the best treatment around haemophilia, and he was infected as a young man with HIV and with hepatitis C, and the effect it had on his life. Sadly, with Nick, he died last year, so he never got to see the end of the public inquiry that he'd campaigned for so long. He will never benefit from compensation that needs to be paid. So it's stories like that really that make you think these are lives that were really impacted so badly, and not just on that particular person who was infected, but on their loved ones and their families, and the opportunities they missed out on. You know, people tell me that they didn't have children because they were worried they might pass on HIV in particular. Just terrible stories, and it's taken far too long to get to the point we're at now that compensation needs to be paid. And Sir Brian Langstaff last April told the government by the end of last year compensation should have been paid, so we're still waiting for the government to do the right thing. It's good we're now seeing this amendment in the Lords tonight, but really this has taken far too long, and too many lives have been destroyed.
We're out of time. Diana Johnson, thank you very much for being on the Politics Hub tonight. Coming up next on the programme, we'll get a reaction to that reported government climb down from our panel. Plus, the race is on to be the next Scottish First Minister, with John Swinney and Kate Forbes both considering standing to replace Humza Yousaf. Hello, welcome back. Well, before the break, we were talking about the battle for compensation for the victims of the infected blood scandal and the government giving ground on this issue tonight. We can get the thoughts now of Dawn and Giles. And we were just chatting in the break about how awful the stories are and how shocking it is that people still dying every week because of this. It's a lot of money, though, Giles, isn't it? It's a quite significant move from the government.
Yeah, look, I think justice delayed is justice denied. I think this issue has crossed the desk of 11 prime ministers and been kicked down the road. Yes, it may cost a lot of money, but look, government can usually find the money, and I can't think of more of a worthy cause than this. Yeah, but absolutely heartbreaking to hear the stories. And we were just saying, like, it's not really been in the public's consciousness that much until the past few months. And unbelievable, this has been going on for, 5 decades.
Yeah, it's true, isn't it? It's actually, it's poor on behalf of many people. It's taken so long for this justice.
Absolutely. When you think about all the families out there, 2 people dying every week, you think, and they've been ignored or they're having to fight for justice. And really, we hear too many of these cases, whether it's the infected blood scandal or the post office scandal or the Windrush scandal. So I actually think there needs to be an independent organisation that deals with compensation, because it needs to be quick and speedy, and people need to have sort of a better quality of life having gone through what they've gone through.
If this is done within the next 3 months, that's before a general election. So I'm guessing that, it looks quite likely that the Conservative government are going to have to budget for it, that it's going to impact the projections at the next autumn statement. I mean, do you think that tax cuts could be off the table?
I have no idea of the quantum of this. I think the public inquiry is going to report back on the 3rd week of May. But I think to your point, it needs to be done quickly, and it might mean you need to redo the sums for the autumn statement. Absolutely.
And I guess it could also be Labour's problem as well, if it's impacting budgets and Labour wins the next election.
Yeah, hopefully Labour will win. Nobody knows the state of the economy or the government finances. But there's a lot of money that is wasted in government. There's a lot of money that needs to be recouped, whether it's from the PPE scandal and all of that money. So there's actually billions of pounds that needs to be recouped. And I think giving it to the people of our country who have suffered, whether it's been through infected blood, as I said, post office, Windrush, then this is their just deserves. And this is how we protect the people of our country. And that's what government should do.
Why do you think it's taken so long?
I think, as I said, I think it's past desk of 11 prime ministers. No one wanted to make a decision. It's one of those things which got kicked into the long grass again and again. But there's no excuse whatsoever. And as we said, since this inquiry started in 2017, I think you say more than 700 people have died, and 2 people continue to die each week. I mean, it's kind of unfathomable, isn't it?
Yeah. It is actually unbelievable.
The thing is, you always need, Dan has done a great job on this, you always need somebody to pick it up. That's the thing. And it's unless somebody picks it up and runs with it, unless there's a drama, you have to get, everybody on board, because, governments don't just say, right, OK, we've done wrong here. They often have to be dragged, kicking and screaming to do the right thing.
And I guess, it does show, doesn't it? We kick our politicians all the time, but the public is always kicking politicians, criticising them for things that they've done wrong and so on. But actually, I guess it does show the power of, a good MP, a campaigning MP, someone who is talking to their constituents, like Dan was just talking about the people who've stayed with her, and trying to get change.
Yeah, and also I suppose the power of the media. To be fair, the Sunday Times have been running quite a full-on campaign on this. I think they've done a very effective job.
And also what your priorities are. People say politics doesn't matter, but politics does matter. And it also matters because different politicians, different political parties, different governments have different priorities. And so the priority of, hopefully an incoming Labour government will be about fairness and equality in society. Now, if that drives you as your priority, you will make different decisions.
OK, thank you both very much indeed. Thank you. Now, last night's show was all about the Scottish National Party and the process of choosing a new leader after the resignation of Humza Yousaf getting underway. Well, today the process still hasn't officially started, but the SNP veteran John Swinney and the previous runner-up Kate Forbes have both emerged as potential successors, although neither, I should say, is confirmed that they will stand. Here's our Scotland correspondent, Conor Gillies.
Could this be her moment?
Standing for the leadership?
Will Kate Forbes run again to be Scotland's First Minister? In an exclusive first interview, this is what she told Sky News.
Are you going to stand?
Well, it's very early days. I know that there's a groundswell of support
for me, certainly from the last contest. But clearly, we need right now a leader that can unite the party, that can take the party forward into an election. So whilst I'm weighing up all options and haven't discounted any, I also need to know that this is the right decision for the party, for the country, apart from for myself.
Do you think it's a stitch-up if John Swinney does get it and pressure's put on you not to stand?
Well, I think that the membership need to be behind the next leader, and the process needs to reflect that.
Are you running? Long day ahead of in Parliament.
A sense, though, among some that SNP stalwart John Swinney could step in to save the chaos. He has the public backing of a raft of cabinet ministers, despite ruling himself out last time.
What's changed is that my party finds itself in a very different and more difficult situation than it found itself in 12 months ago, and I would not be doing a service to the many people who have contacted me asking me to stand if I don't think about this properly.
There is a sense of déjà vu, little over a year since the SNP endured its most recent leadership battle. It was bruising, it was damaging, and senior figures within the party do not want a rerun of that. And the candidates, whoever they are, will be acutely aware that this is a general election year.
I think there's going to be a massive shift to the Labour vote, especially across the Central Belt and especially in Glasgow.
Do you care who takes over, or it does not really important?
Like for someone with the right kind of morals for Scotland and making sure they're supporting what we want to see with the country.
But for now, that's a decision for the SNP. Hamza Yousaf here refusing to be drawn into the drama, where the latest chapter is only just beginning. Conor Gillis, Sky News, Edinburgh.
Now, the local elections are only 2 days away, and we've got some new polling that really drills down into what might happen in specific areas in a way that we've not really seen before. Our Deputy Political Editor Sam Coates is here with the details.
Thank you, Sophie. On Thursday, there are more than 2,600 seats up for election in 107 different English councils. Tonight, YouGov have made some final calls for some of these contests, the key ones, using MRP modelling after interviewing almost 9,000 people over 2 weeks. Here exclusively on Sky News are the headlines. Let's start with two key battlegrounds. Let's look at them. And it's Milton Keynes in Buckinghamshire and Hyneburn in Lancashire. Now, what we're about to see, Labour HQ will be very pleased with. Let's have a look. Here it is. Sky and YouGov say they're both going red. Now, Hyneburn is a red wall council that has proved sticky recently. That's what they'll be pleased about. That Milton Keynes, a great political bellwether. Labour need to be able to be showing that they're doing well here in the next general election. Now, there are races that YouGov say are more of a toss-up. Norwich in the east and Tamworth in the West Midlands. Now, Labour look like they're building momentum in both councils, but the projection here is that these races are too close to call. Reigate is an unusual council, that's the one here. There are local difficulties and defections making it actually easier for the Tories to win back. Now, let's look at the next one. The YouGov projection says that there will also be parties which lose control of councils, and these are there. You've got Hull in Yorkshire. That's where Labour's snapping at the Lib Dems' heels. Lib Dems tell me that they're worried about Hull, but they've always just about managed to hang on in the past. Walsall down at the bottom here. Now, that one matters because it's one of the few places where we'll all be watching to see the performance of Reform UK, which is fielding candidates in 15 of the 20 wards in that council. Now, Thursday is not just about councils maybe changing hands. What we want to know is where voting patterns are changing significantly and who's got momentum and who hasn't. So let's have a look. The big story of the night will be measuring Labour advances. And here's where YouGov says that that is happening. Labour momentum in the south, in Milton Keynes, in Thurrock, in the east, in Peterborough, the Midlands, in Walsall, and the north east, Lincolnshire. Labour will be pleased with this list here because I think it shows they're competitive in lots of places that they need. But here's where Labour is also advancing. But YouGov says that that advance is less strong. Again, this list has areas from all around the country. And finally, here's where YouGov project that they're not advancing, or where actually the Tories are doing OK, Colchester, Hull, Stockport, Sheffield, Solihull. The big picture is that several of these show the Tory vote being split between Labour and other parties. But little change in Colchester. Well, that's just a bit of a small warning bell for Labour. You know, at the general election, they need to overturn a majority here of 10,000. So if these happen on the night and this happens on the night, they will be asking why. Reigate, another outlier. As we said before, they have seen a raft of Tory defections. Now, much of the local election conversation, as you'll hear from Friday and Saturday onwards, will be dominated by mayoral contests. Some of the biggest names in politics outside London standing again. What happens in their councils could tell us much more about a general election, whenever that comes.
Sam Coates there. Thank you very much, Sam. And don't worry, the Politics Hub will be on air later in the week to bring you all the fallout from those elections. We've got 2 special 2-hour programmes on Friday and Saturday between 7 and 9 p.m. Still to come on the Politics Hub. As Labour raid the archives to make the late Conservative Chancellor Nigel Lawson a star witness in their attack on the Conservatives' tax plans, we're going to be quizzing our panel on what secret documents have told us about Prime Minister's past.
Coming up on the UK Tonight at 8 o'clock, as a 14-year-old is stabbed to death in a sword attack in East London, leaving 4 other people in hospital. Tonight, we'll explore what is driving the UK's knife crime epidemic. We'll ask just how easy it is to get hold of big blades and swords and why these attacks are happening. I'm going to be joined by a panel of guests, campaigners, community workers, policy advisors and bereaved parents as we discuss how to get knives off the country streets.
Unfortunately, last year while I was on holiday, I had my drink spiked, and I was actually very fortunate. I got safely to hospital. My boyfriend was there to help me, and so were other members of the public. However, the thing that terrified me most is I did share this experience on social media as it came such a shock to myself. And when I shared it on social media, I discovered that this is actually happening to so many people so often, people of all ages, and they were all in the same boat as myself where they didn't know what to do. For me, when I got spiked, I almost felt as though I was a part of like a freak accident, or it was somewhat myself to blame in the situation. However, these people were going out motivated to do this, and the reason for their motivation, I honestly don't even want to know. And I was lucky enough that I didn't have to face any of the repercussions of their further actions, but this is a huge issue, and other people are ending up in far worse situations than I did. How can it be stopped? That is such a great question, because one of the issues at the moment is that it is severely underreported. So in our legal system and within crimes, it's barely even recognised, which is such a shame, because some people, the results of this are extremely awful, and considering God knows what happens to a lot of people after they've been spiked, and not to mention the mental health repercussions. I think in terms of things to help stop this, so obviously what we're doing right now, raising awareness, is a great start. But I do think there needs to be a massive education factor, and perhaps even a deeper dive into nightlife and the way that nightclubs and venues are trained to deal with these situations. Because when you think about it, in a nightclub or a bar, if someone is intoxicated and they're appearing to be sloppy, messy or drunk, what happens to them? Generally, they actually get kicked out of the venue into the streets on their own. And if they've been spiked by someone who has further intentions with them and they're getting kicked out onto the street, it actually puts them at such a risk of more danger. I would say always going out with a close group of friends and making sure people know that where your whereabouts is. Now, if for some reason you felt as though your drink has been spiked or you're just unsafe in these nightlife environments, reaching out to the bar staff, reaching out to the securities, and making sure you're in contact with people you know the whole night. It's so crucial.
Hello and welcome back to the Politics Hub. Now, the Labour Party continued their attack today on the government's plans to merge national insurance and income tax. The star witness, the former Conservative Chancellor Nigel Lawson, who died last year. The killer document was a green paper written by him 38 years ago, and the claim that any move to merge would hit pensioners hardest. Well, anything that Labour researchers can do, we can probably have a go at as well here on the Politics Hub. So we've raided the archives for some morsels about former Prime Ministers, and we're going to quiz our duo, Giles and Dawn, to see how they do. Feel free to play along at home as well. Some of these are quite tricky, but I reckon they're all guessable. Right, this is the first question. Are you ready? Here we are. Tony Blair did not invite the press to join him to which European country to avoid headlines that he was snuggling up to their leader?
I'll go for Germany.
Oh my goodness, I don't know. They were snuggling up to their leader. I have no idea.
It was Italy. Silvio Berlusconi.
Okay.
It was a UK-Italy summit in Rome, and he wanted to avoid any headlines suggesting he was snuggling up to... There he is, that man there. He's got a very loving look, hasn't he? I have to say. It's like, I can see, it's quite intense.
He does look like
Blair's like,
a bit loving.
Right, number two. Question number two. During a historic 20th century moment, which Prime Minister had to find time to appoint a new Eton College provost? 20th century moment, so I think you can guess it's going to go a little bit further back in time. Further back than Tony Blair. Can't name me I mean, he was one of the most famous.
It's a he. You've given.
There you go.
Harold Wilson.
It can't be.
I'll go for Harold Wilson. Yeah.
I was just going to say.
Further back.
Eden.
Churchill.
Oh, Churchill.
Right.
It was Churchill. 4 months after the 1944 D-Day landings, and less than a month after one of these sort of failed, oh goodness, there he is, operations. So William Churchill had to appoint a new Eton College provost. There you go.
I didn't even know it was in the gift of the Prime Minister.
Who knew? Who knew? I think we've got time to squeeze a couple more in. Which world leader was the first to receive the special number 10 cufflinks?
Oh.
Current world leader.
Current world leader. Is he American?
He's not American. He's someone that you probably wouldn't give cufflinks to now if you were the current Prime Minister.
Macron?
Like, worse than Macron.
Right, OK.
So the National Archives showed that Vladimir Putin was the first leader to receive special number 10 cufflinks. It was a gift to him from Tony Blair, who took up the Russian leader's invitation to his birthday.
Oh, wow. When was this? What year was this?
2001?
I don't know, I'll be honest. It's much easier when you've got the answers. One last one. When they had a meeting with Rupert Murdoch, which Prime Minister was told to show supreme confidence and clear vision?
I think they all would have been told that, wouldn't they? But Tony Blair, when they had a meeting with Rupert, which Prime Minister told?
Bid to secure his support in a general election. Blair. It was actually John Major.
Really?
Oh, right, OK.
In a bid to secure the support in the 1917 general election. A tricky quiz today. Thank you very much for coming on and giving us a go. Great to have you on the panel, both of you. Well, that is it from us tonight, but I'll see you tomorrow at 7. Up next, it's the UK Tonight with Sarah Jamie. She's got a special programme on knife crime following the death of a 14-year-old boy in East London today. Sarah Jamie with the UK Tonight. That is up next with that special programme.